academically eligible to play Division I athletics is they're going to require that you have completed 16 core courses by the time you graduate high school. So at the end of your senior year when they evaluate the transcript, you have to have gotten 16 core courses. You need 4 full years of English. You need 3 full years of math. You need 2 years of science. You need 1 additional year of English, math, or science. Okay? You need 2 years of social studies, and then 4 years of additional core courses, which means you can come from any of those 4 categories or 4 languages. Okay? So when the NCAA evaluates your transcript, they're going to throw out all of your non-core courses. So your PE classes, your business classes, your computer classes, your home ec, driver's ed, all those classes you probably got A's and B's in, throwing those out. Okay, so they calculate your GPA as far as they're concerned. It's like you didn't even take those classes. They're only worried about how you did and what they consider core courses. Okay? Most of the classes that you take in those subject areas that I just named, English, math, science, social studies, and foreign language, you're going to need core courses. Occasionally, you might have a class in those subject areas that is not approved by the NCAA, and that's typically because it's considered to be a below grade level class. Okay, so in other words, like let's say you're a freshman and you're taking algebra, okay, and your school offers algebra 1, but then they also offer what they call like algebra 1A and algebra 1B, basically like what they consider the low level algebra. Right, so it takes you 2 years to complete a set of that class is typically considered, it's typically not a core course. Okay? So just because it's algebra doesn't automatically guarantee it's going to be a core course. Alright, your athletic director or your guidance counselor, whoever at your school is in charge of handling the communication with the NCAA, should be able to tell you which courses are core courses at your school and which ones are not. They can also be looked up online. And it'll give you a list of all the courses at each individual high school that are approved. But typically, most classes that you're going to take in those categories are going to be core courses. Okay? There's one other little caveat that the NCAA has added to the 16 core courses, and it just went into effect for the 2016 high school class. So guys who are going to be freshmen this coming year, they now require that by the start of your senior year, that you've completed a minimum of 10 courses, and at least 7 of those 10 have to be in English, math, or science. So what the NCAA saw happening was guys were slacking off early in their high school career, they weren't doing very well, and then all of a sudden they realized, oh man, I'm a senior, I got to get my act together. They were just loading up on more courses their senior year, and they were wiping out a lot of bad grades early on by taking a bunch of extra core courses that senior year. Because a lot of people are going to take more than 16 core courses. You get to pick basically your best 16. So if you have more, like let's say you only need 3 years of math, but you have 4 years of math, and you had 2 semesters that you got easy. All right, you only have to count your best 3 years. Okay, so they're trying to kind of get rid of that loophole, and they're trying to make what you do early on in your high school career matter a little more. So just understand that going into your senior year, you have to lock in 10 classes, which means you can only basically, the most you can take your senior year is 6. You can take more, pick your best 6, but you're only going to get to count 6 classes your senior year. You don't have to count 6, but that would be about the maximum. Does that make sense to you? So you need 16 total, you need to meet the benchmarks in each subject area, and you got to lock in 10 going into your senior year, 7 of which have to be English, math. Now, all this, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you. All this stuff that I'm talking about from an initial eligibility perspective, you can go to the NCAA Eligibility Center website, which is ncaaeligibilitycenter.org. Just Google NCAA Eligibility Center, it'll come right up. They've got a nice little like 2-page handout that has all this information. It's very easy to understand and outlines it pretty good. So if you're reporting, you're not going to remember all of it. Very easy access to it. Alright, the next thing that they're going to do, once they've determined that you've got your 16 core courses, you've met all those benchmarks, they're going to calculate your core course GPA. So in those 16 courses, they're going to figure out what your GPA is. Based on that GPA, they're going to look at your test score and determine whether or not you're eligible. So they use a sliding scale. The higher your test score is, the lower your GPA can be. The lower your test score is, the higher your GPA is. Okay? So the minimum even if you have, say you get a 36 on your ACT, which is the highest score you can possibly get, all right, the minimum your GPA can be is still a 2.4 GPA. So understand, if your transcript says you're a 3.0, your 4 is probably 2.8, somewhere in that ballpark, because you're typically doing pretty well in your PE classes and stuff, so that's going to inflate that number a little bit. So don't necessarily be fooled. If you got a 2.5 right now, you probably don't have a 2.5 core. All right, you're probably right there in a borderline, you know, whether you're going to be eligible or not. Okay, so even with a perfect test score, you have to have at least a 2.3 GPA. That's the minimum you can have to be eligible. All right, and then obviously the lower that GPA is, if you got a 2.3, your test score is going to have to be top of the charts. Okay, I don't want you guys to worry a ton. If you're a pretty decent student, you're going to be fine. Most guys, without even paying attention, are going to get to the 16.4. Most guys are going to meet the test score and the GPA threshold. Okay, they're not overly taxing. However, if you're a guy that you're mostly C student, understand a C average is a 2.0. That's under required. So if you've been getting mostly C's up to this point, especially in your core courses, you need to get into here. You need to start getting A's and B's. Okay. Does anybody have any questions on any of that additional eligibility stuff? GPA test score stuff or the core course requirements?
Say it like that. Would you say like the SAT?
So the test score requirements are all going to depend on what your GPA is. So I couldn't tell you off the top of my head because it's a huge scale. But what I can tell you is if you have the minimum GPA of like a 2.3, you need to have, I think, a 75 on the ACT. So when they use your ACT score, they're gonna add up each of the 4 sections. So they're gonna use what they call your sum score. Okay. So they're gonna add up the English score, the math score, the reading score, and the social science score. And then that's going to be the number they use. So most people, when they talk about the ACT, they're used to saying, like, I got an 18. You can basically multiply that by 4, and that gets you the sum score for most people. So the sum required, if you have a 2.3, is like a 75. That's like maxed out. Once you get a 75 or 76 on the ACT, it doesn't matter how much higher you get, because you're going to have the minimum. So that equates to like a 19. Okay. On the SAT, it's closer to like, I want to say like an 860 on the 2-part. Now, what I will tell you with the SAT is they've recently changed the test. It's still out of the same number of points, but the scores have been inflated. So that ACT or that SAT scoring scale is going to change. As soon as they get a better idea of how much it's inflated, they're going to adjust that. I've been hearing at least 50 points. So in other words, like if you took it before they changed it, you got a 1,000. Now you're getting like a 10,050 or 1,100. All right, so that scale is going to change a little bit. Does that make sense? Okay, so that answered.
With the 4 classes, if there's something that they're borderline to C, can they retake it prior to their senior
so you
year?
can, if you retake the class, that's a good question. Like, let's say you took Algebra 1 and you failed. Okay? If you take Algebra 1 again and you get a B in it, they're going to only count the B. They're not going to count the. They're not going to count the.
Only if you take it prior to your senior year, though.
Right. So if it gets complicated. Yes and no. So, like, let's say going into your senior year, let's say you've completed like 12 core courses. You only have to lock in 10. Okay? So you do have some wiggle room to replace grades from those other 2 that you didn't have to lock in. Does that make sense? It can get a little bit, it gets a little bit complicated, but technically the answer would be.
So if you have 3 C's, you can only really change 2 of them to try to get an A or B.
Yeah, like let's say you need to lock in 7 of those math or science classes. Like let's say you have 8 of them. You're going to be able to replace the grades from 1. Okay, or if you've got 12 total, you might be able to replace the grades from 2. Any other questions on any of that stuff? All right, if you think of them, we can come back to that. But let's move on to some of the baseball specific stuff. Some things that I think you guys all need to be aware of, because I think this will help the recruiting process make a little bit more sense. all Division I teams are limited to a roster of 35 players. Okay, that hasn't always been the case, but for the last 7 or 8 years, the NCAA's put a roster cap. So no team is allowed more than 35 guys. Now, you don't have to meet that cap until you start the season. So up until your first game in the spring, you can have as many guys as you want. But once you play that first game, you have to submit a roster of 35 players to the NCAA, and then that roster cannot be changed. From that point forward, those are the only 35 guys who can play or practice on your team for the rest of that year. Okay? In addition to that cap of 35 guys, of those 35 players, no more than 27 to be on scholarship at any one time. So that means if you have a full roster of 35 guys, you can have no more, or you're going to have at least 8 walk-ons. Now you can have more because there's no rule that says you have to have 27 guys on scholarship. You just can't have any more than that. So if you have a roster of 35, you have to have at least 8 walk-ons. Okay? In addition to those roster rules, we're also only allowed 11.7 scholarships. Okay? That's every Division I program. Any more than that. So what that means, if you do the math, if you've got 27 guys on scholarship and you've got 11.7 scholarships, that means the average scholarship is going to be somewhere in the 40% range. Okay? Now, a lot of people that aren't educated about the process, understanding all the rules, they're a little surprised by it. Football and basketball are what they consider head count sports, meaning you're either on a full ride or you're on nothing. So like our football team's got 86 full scholarships. They can't break those up and give one guy half and another guy half. You're either on, you get everything paid for, or you're a walk-on and get nothing paid for. There's no in between. Same with basketball. Okay? Baseball is probably, when you look at the roster size and the scholarship amounts we have to work with, we're the most underfunded sport in all of the NCAA. Right? But I think going through the recruiting process and understanding that is important because people maybe aren't aware of that and get a 40% scholarship offer and they're going, wow, that's plus a month. That's not necessarily the case because we don't have a whole lot of money. We've got to divide it up amongst a lot of guys. Now, the only restriction that we have on how we can divvy up that money is if we do offer a scholarship, it has to be a minimum of 25% of the total cost. So we could offer a guy anywhere from 25% all the way up to a full scholarship. Anywhere, it just can't be less than 25. Okay. Any questions on scholarships? Yes.
The scholarships annual? They're still annual?
They are. So it is possible now to give multi-year scholarships. I know that as an athletic department here, we are not doing that. And most of the schools that I've talked to are also still sticking with the 1-year renewable scholarships. Now, the way we kind of approach it is every scholarship is 1-year renewal, meaning at the end of the year we have to renew that scholarship. It's not automatically renewed. However, the way we deal with our renewals, guys are taking care of business off the field, staying out of trouble. They're doing what they're supposed to do academically and taking care of business in the classroom. And they're putting forth the effort that we're asking of them baseball-wise. Those scholarships are renewed. It's not, it's not like you have a bad year and we're just going to yank your money away. I can only speak for us. I can't speak for everybody. But that's kind of how we do it. Sure, it can. There's nothing saying that if you come in as a walk-on or you come in at 25% or really at any level, there's nothing to say that we can't increase that. When a guy comes in, maybe does well as a freshman, and all of a sudden he's our Friday night starter, he's an All-American. Yeah, absolutely. We may afford that guy if we have the money. The thing to understand is the way recruiting is now, we're recruiting so far out that sometimes it's hard to make immediate adjustments to guys' scholarships just because we may be going into say the 2017 season where we've already got a bunch of commitments in the 2018 class. So because it's so far out now, sometimes it can take a couple of years to make those adjustments. But yes, absolutely, it can go up just like it can go down. Other questions on scholarships?
It may be a philosophy you have, but is there a difference between in-state and out-of-state when it comes to scholarship money?
Yeah, I don't know if there's really I don't know if there's a difference in terms of how we allocate it, but here's what I'll tell you. It costs somewhere between 16.5 and 17.5 to go here, depending on how many dollars you're taking stuff as an in-state student. If you're out of state, it's about $10,000 or so more a year. So if we offer an in-state kid 50%, that family's got to come out of pocket about $8 grand. If we offer that same 50% scholarship to an out-of-state kid, they're coming out of pocket like $14,000. So, obviously what I'll tell you, if you look at our roster, we're like 98% Florida. And that's for a couple reasons. One, because there's a lot of good players in Florida. Two, because it's a lot easier for us to make use of Florida than for the kids. I don't know. At the end of the day, we want good players. I don't care if they come from Africa or Norway or Florida. We just want good players. But it becomes a lot easier for us to make it affordable for families when we're dealing with kids from the state. We may have to. We may get a kid. We got two kids of equal ability level, right? One's from Florida, one's from California, and both families they can afford $5,000 out of pocket. We can get that Florida kid for a much lower percentage, and his family still pay $5,000 than what it would take to get that kid from California. So we're probably going to pick the kid from Florida. In that case, you pick the same player. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
When you talk about scholarships and money, how does that affect if you get Bright Futures or you get something from a private organization
Great
or
question. So
financial aid, all that other stuff like that?
right. So most of the money that you can qualify for, whether it's based on financial need or it's academic, earned academically, that is what they call stackable money. Meaning you can add that on top of your baseball scholarship, and it does not count towards the 11.7 budget that we have as a program. So, we have a lot of guys. We have several guys who are on, say they're on about a 40% baseball scholarship, but because they're getting some Pell money that's e-based from FAFSA, they're good students in the Bright Futures, and they've given some academic money to USF. They're not paying a dime to go here, but we're only giving them, say, a 40% scholarship. So that is another great way to make college affordable. Obviously, there's nothing you can do about the financial part of it. You're either going to qualify for that or you're not. The academic component of it, obviously, you have some control over that based on how you're doing in the classroom. That's why doing well academically is going to, not only is it going to open more doors for you in terms of which colleges you're going to be able to get into, but it's also going to make it easier for your family to afford it. Because you might be able to earn some, whether it's Bright Futures or institutional scholarships, that have a chance to significantly reduce that out-of-pocket cost. Other questions? Yes. Good question. So the question was, are the division schools the same? And the answer is no, they're not. Some of them are, and some of them aren't. And I've never coached at that level, so I can't tell you exactly what the differences are. But what I can tell you is everything that I'm talking about today, whether it's the scholarship rules or the initial eligibility rules, those are Division I specific. Some of those may apply to other divisions, some of them may not. So obviously junior college is not even within they're not even under the umbrella of the NCAA, so they have their own completely separate rules, which there's not a whole lot of, honestly. Division II, they're going to have some of the same rules. They're generally going to be a little bit less strict. And then Division III is they're pretty much very few overall rules, and they leave it more up to the individual institutions in terms of who they admit, what it takes to go. But in terms of if you want to know what the specific rules were, you can look those up on the eligibility center website. In fact, that handout that I talked about, they have, you can print out off there. I believe it has the Division II rules as well, kind of how they compare to what I just talked about. Good question. Other questions? Okay. So I'm going to leave you guys with this. The recruiting process has really changed. This is going to be my 11th or 12th year coaching at this level. And in that time, the recruiting process it's changed immensely. When I first started doing this, it was, the summer before guys' senior years in high school was really when the evaluation process really started. July 1st, I'm going to go back and add something here. But July 1st was really the time when that was when we were first allowed to call guys, July 1 after their junior year. And that was really our first contact with guys. That's kind of when the process would really begin. And then once school started up, guys would take their visits, and then they would decide, in late August, September, October, where they were going to go to school of their senior year, and then they would sign their NOI in November. So it was a much slower process. Now that process is really accelerated, at least at our level. You're seeing guys, as crazy as it sounds, there's guys that have committed to school, college, before they've even played a high school. As crazy as it sounds, that's actually happening. Now, I'm not telling you that's the norm, I'm just telling you it's happening. What is the norm is a lot of the best players are deciding, as really before their junior year, they're making early commitments to school. What I want to tell you guys is you need to try to kind of put blinders on when you go through this process. You need to not worry about what other people are doing. You need to worry about yourself. And the best advice that I can give you is you need to sit down sooner rather than later and start thinking about what is important. When you do decide where you're going to go to college, what are the things that matter? Baseball-wise, what matters? Is it a really nice facility? Is it a really good coaching staff, a track record of developing players? Is it, is it being close to home? Is it a really good academic school with an engineering program? Is it a place that, financially, what can work for my family? What's realistic for us? You need to kind of start thinking about those things, whether it's by yourself, whether it's probably your parents should be included in that process. Even if you're not writing it down, at least mentally, just kind of getting an idea in your head of what matters to you and what are you looking for. When you start to go through the process, when schools start to contact you and things like that, which is going to happen at different points in time for everybody. If you've already thought about that stuff, when you go visit a school, you're going to be able to figure out pretty quickly, like, all right, does this place check off the boxes of things that I found important? And if you're finding that a school is everything that you want, if you find that school when you're a sophomore and they make you a great offer and you feel good about everything, there's nothing wrong with making that commitment. But if you haven't found that place yet, that's okay. Keep looking. There's no reason to settle before you have to settle. Now, obviously, the longer it goes on, the closer you get to graduation, the more you have to kind of start to maybe change your expectations of what you're looking for. But my thing is, just if you're a freshman or sophomore in high school, there's no reason to sell yourself short. If you don't find that perfect fit, just keep waiting. Everybody is going to develop at a different rate. And I've seen guys who you see them as freshmen, and you're like, there's no way this guy's ever going to be able to play at this level. And then next thing you know, that guy turns into a really high draft pick in high school. Some guys they're 6'1", 195, chiseled. They maybe never lifted a weight in their life, but they look like they lift every day when they're 15. But then there's other guys that when they're 15, they're 5'5", they weigh 130 pounds, and then all of a sudden, 3 years later, they're 6'2", 205, because they hit growth spurt and they start working out, and now they're a totally different guy. So I try to never cross a guy off my list until late in that guy's high school career. If I'm watching freshmen and sophomores, I might be saying, hey, this is not a guy for us right now, but I'm not saying because I've just seen too often where guys that I never thought would turn into good players turn into great players. It happens all the time. And so if you're one of those guys that maybe just hasn't gotten to that point of development yet, you may not have some schools that are showing it. But that doesn't mean you won't a year from now, or 2 years from now, or whenever. So the biggest thing is don't panic. When you spend all day on Twitter reading about follow perfect game and all that, you're seeing 25 guys a day committed. Okay? Sometimes that can make you feel like, man, what's wrong with me? Why am I not? Why are all these schools not showing this to me? And it doesn't mean that you're not a good player. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be. Maybe you're just not there yet. But that doesn't mean it can't. some of the best players that we've ever signed, guys that we've gotten really late in the process, some of them have come in as walk-ons and left as top 5 round draft picks. It happens. It's not just, that really does happen. So just be patient, worry about yourself, don't be caught up in what everybody else is doing or saying. And I know that's easier said than done, but I promise you, you're going to have a lot more fun playing. You're going to enjoy things, and you're just going to be a lot happier if you just try to block all that out. Well, here's what I'll tell you. The high school season is going on at the same time as our season. So it's a lot more difficult for us to get out to games in the spring than it is in the summer. Because in the summer we have nothing else to do. We're literally at games pretty much every day from the end of our season until all the school games. Which is why the summer is probably one of the most important parts of the evaluation process for us. That being said, I still try to in the spring, if I need to or if I can get out to high school games, I'm going to do it now. I know it's harder for me to go far away, in the summer it's not. But, so I'm going to be probably a little bit more local with my recruiting in the spring just because it's easier to get there, get back, get practice, get hanging, things like that. But we're going to still try to see high school games. That being said, if you guys are serious about playing in college, the summer is important. You need to play in the summer. All you're doing is playing in the spring. It is possible that you might you may not get as much exposure as the guys who play in the summer. I'm being honest. But that doesn't, I'm not telling you that, look, if you're a good player, with Twitter and the internet and everything now, there's just so, I'm not telling you guys don't slip through the cracks because they do. There's guys that are late bloomers and, sometimes guys just don't get seen, but that happens less and less now than it ever has. I can sit in my living room right now and I can just scroll through Twitter and look at all these videos that all these different places are posting of guys. So it's easier than ever for us to find out about guys than it has been before. So I still believe if you're a good player, somebody's going to sign you. They are. So, because all it takes is like one scout to see you, and then he tells his buddy, he tells his buddy, he tells me, and the next thing you know, everybody knows about it. So I will tell you that it's harder to be seen during the spring because we're playing so much, but it's not impossible. But I would highly recommend playing in the summer if you want to play at this level of college or any college. You're going to increase your chances.
In the summer when you're not playing with high school and your kids who do travel ball, do you all ever go to any of those, or what types of games or tournaments are you all going to in the summer?
Yeah, that's what we're seeing. That's what we're spending the summer doing is basically watching mostly travel baseball. The best advice I can give you is if you want to go play with and against the best players, because if you're in tournaments where there's a lot of good teams, a lot of good players, there's going to be a lot of college coaches. We've only got, our staff is 4 guys. That's what we're allowed. Only 3 of us can recruit. So at a maximum, we can be 3 places at one time. Okay. So we're spread thin as it is. So we're going to have to go where there's the biggest concentration of good players. So if I have a choice of going to this tournament where there's 1 guy I need to see, or this tournament where there's 15 guys I need to see, I'm going to go to the tournament where there's 15. Because I only have so much time, and if I can knock out 15 guys at one time, that's what I'm going to do. It just makes sense. So do your homework, whether it comes to showcases or travel teams you're playing on or whatever. If you want to try to play with and against as many good players as you possibly can, that's going to give you your highest chance of getting the exposure that you're looking for. It's going to be the most bang for your buck. Other questions? Okay. All right, guys. Well, we really appreciate you being here today. I think that I understand there's only so many of these things that you can do because cost money. You can't just go to every single one. So first of all, we appreciate the fact that you guys thought enough of us to be here today. You know, the thing I will tell you is if you want to make sure that a particular school has a chance to see you play, you know, going to their camp is obviously a way to guarantee that they've seen you. So I think, you know, even though you can't go to a wall, if you've got a couple of schools that you're very interested in, you want to make sure that you give yourself the best opportunity to be seen by them. You know, going to their camp is a good way to do it. But you know, we saw some good things today from a lot of different guys. You know, we usually end up getting a guy or two every year out of these camps. So sometimes it's a guy, you know, maybe you're only a freshman, so you know you may not hear from us right now. But if you're a guy that hey, we saw some stuff from today, and we're going to continue to follow you, and as we see you develop, you know, maybe that's. We can only go out to so many games in the spring, but if we've got guys who we've seen that, hey, we think this guy's pretty interesting, we want to see how he's doing, I'm going to make a priority to go out and see him play, whether it's in the spring or the summer. So this is just a very good starting point for us with a lot of you guys. So we really appreciate you being here today. Luckily the rain kind of held off. We just had that slight delay. So travel safe home, and you know if there's anything that I can do